right, let's go ahead and start with Chapter 5 of Unit 10. Today we have quite a few objectives, so let's get started. Today's objectives are, I will write, graph, and interpret the expense function. I will write, graph, and interpret the revenue function. I will identify the points of intersection of the expense and revenue functions. And I will identify break-even points and explain them in the context of the problem. Here's our key terms or vocabulary for this unit. Make sure that you've reviewed it before moving on with this video. All right, for example 1, it says a particular item in Picasso Paints product line cost $7 in each to manufacture. The fixed costs are $28,000. The demand function is Q equals negative 500p plus 30,000, where Q is the quantity the public will buy, given the price P. Graph the expense function in terms of the price of the coordinate plane. So a few things that we've got to go through and get first is we need that expense function. And in order to get the expense function, that is our 7Q plus our fixed expenses of 28,000. So if you remember from the last chapter, 7 is the cost to produce 1 unit, 28,000 is your fixed expenses. Now what we're going to do is, you see we have a Q here, and we have our equation for our demand function, which is where we plug that in. And we get E equals 7.0 times the quantity, negative 500p plus 30,000 plus the 28,000. Next, we're going to go ahead and distribute our values. And we end up with E equals negative 3,500p plus 210,000 plus the 28,000. Finally, my expense function is negative 3,500p plus 238,000. Okay, now that we have this, we need to find our vertical axis and our horizontal axis. We're going to find our intercepts. The reason that we're finding these is when we graph the particular equation, we want to know what we need to do to the window so that we can see it appropriately. So in order to do that, we're basically going to find our vertical axis, we're going to go ahead and make P 0. So when we plug in our equation, we get expense equals negative 3,500 times 0 plus the 238,000. Well, 3,500 times 0 is 0. So I know my vertical axis, or on my y-axis, is going to be 238,000. Now to find my horizontal, I'm going to go ahead and set my expenses at 0 and find my x-axis. So I've got 0 equals negative 3,500p plus the 238,000. I'm going to go ahead and add the 35p to each side and solve this algebraically. I end up with 3,500p equals 238,000. When I divide by 3,500, I find that my price, or my horizontal axis, or my x, is 68. So now let's go ahead and look at the graph of this. I've gone ahead and I've put the equation in already, and it looks like it messed up just a little bit, so let me fix that. So if we've got for our equation, let me clear it and we'll put it in again. And again, I apologize for this. All right, there we go. So you can see that I put in our expense equation of negative 3,500x plus the 238,000. Now here's why we put in, or why we solved for our intercepts. We now need to go to our window, and our window is going to be from 0 on the upside up to, we're going to go a little bit higher than that 68, and we're going to go to 70. Then we go to our x minimum, we're going to start at 0. And we're going to go up to 500,000. That is quite a bit bigger than the 238, but it does allow you to see it much better. We could also put in the 250,000, and it would work as well. And then we're going to go ahead and graph our equation. So if you put 250,000 into your window, that is what your graph will look like. And there we go with that one. All right, please press pause. Go ahead and solve this question. When you're ready, come back and we'll work it together. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at this one. It says an electronics company manufactures earphones for the portable musical devices. Each earphone costs $5 to manufacture with a fixed cost of $20,000. So we know that our expense equation is E equals 5Q plus the 20,000. Then it says the demand function is Q equals negative 200P plus 40,000. Write the expense function in terms of Q and determine a suitable viewing window for that function. Graph the function. So when we plug into our expense, we've got expense equals 7 times negative 5P plus the 30,000 plus the 28,000. We're going to go ahead and distribute, and we end up with E equals negative, I'm going to skip a couple of steps here because I think we're to that point where I can, and you'll know how I got to what I got to. After distributing and then combining like terms, I get plus 238,000. Okay? Actually, sorry, I'm mixing it up with the previous problem. So let's try that again. So I've got E equals 5 times negative 200P plus the 40,000 plus the 20,000. Sorry about that, everyone. Now we're going to go ahead and distribute. And we end up with E equals negative 1,000P. Again, now I'm going to combine some like terms, and I end up with plus 220,000. Now I'm going to go ahead and determine my x and y intercept just as I did before. So I've got E equals negative 1,000 times 0 plus the 220,000. And so the expense where E, or profit, is 0 is 220,000. Now if I do 0 equals negative 1,000 P plus the 220,000, I'm going to move that 1,000 over. And I get 1,000 P equals 220,000. Divide both sides by the 1,000, which is really just eliminating 3 of the zeros, and I get 220. So now I've got my x and my y. Let's go ahead and set our window on the calculator. So my equation, first off, is negative. Now, one thought on this calculator, make sure that you are using this negative button down here on the bottom next to the enter key and not the subtraction key. So we have negative, and again, I'm sorry, sometimes the calculator actually locks up, so let me see if I can get it to go back. All right, so we have negative 1,000, and we're going to use our X, plus 220,000. We're going to set our window. And you can see I've already set it from 0 to 220, and then 200,000 to 250,000. And now let's graph it. Now looking at that, we're only seeing a portion of it. So let's change that graph from 0 to 20. And now we can see what the equation looks like. All right, so now let's go ahead and move on to our next problem here. It says, what is the revenue equation for the Picasso Paints products? Write the revenue equation in terms of price. So with revenue, you need to know that revenue, it equals your profit times your Q, or demand function here. So we've got R equals P times that demand function, which was the negative 500P plus 30,000. And we got that from example 1. And then we're going to multiply through or distribute through. So our revenue equation is negative 500P squared, because you've got P times P, plus 30,000 times P. And that's our revenue function. It's a quadratic equation in the form of AX squared plus BX plus C. So in this case, A equals negative 500, B equals the 30,000, and C in this case is 0 because there is no constant number that's next to this. So we know because of this that our parabola is going to open up downward when we graph it. Okay? So go ahead and, for this next example, press pause and solve and come back when you're ready. Okay, so it says determine the revenue if the price is set at $25. We know that our revenue equation is the negative 500 P squared plus 30,000 P. So all we're going to do is we're going to plug $25 in everywhere that we have P. So revenue equals negative 500 times 25 squared plus 30,000 times 25. When we multiply this through, adding it all together, we end up with 437,500. So make sure in order, you take your 25 squared, which is 625, then you're going to multiply it by the 500, and then you're going to add it to whatever 25 times 300 or 30,000 is, and that's where we got the 437,000. All right, example 3 says to graph the revenue function on a coordinate plane. So when we're looking at that, it is a portion of our quadratic formula that is negative b all over 2a. And we've already identified that a equals negative 500 and b equals the 30,000. So when plugging this in, we've got negative 30,000 divided by 2 times negative 500, which equals negative 30,000 divided by negative 1,000, and we end up with 30. So go ahead and finish writing this through, and on our next video, we will actually graph it.